Fourth grade. This screencast will take you through the updated test prep unit after the literacy steering team had a chance to look at both this unit combined with the newly released IAR items. We wanted to make sure that this unit would really fully prepare students for the Illinois assessment. So with that in mind, we wanted to first take you through where you can find the unit materials. They will be linked into the map this week, but you would just go to the elementary curriculum drive under literacy. Within grade 4, there'll be a folder for test prep materials found right here. So once you're in there, you would just click on test prep materials. You'll notice there's 3 weeks, so each of the resources for each week are right there. Outside of that, you'll notice the main documents for this unit. Here's the district updated unit. Here are the revised reading and writing teachers college documents. We've taken an extra step to annotate those documents to show you where things have been omitted and what sessions and weeks the teachers college fits in with our district unit now. So let's open up this document to just go through the structure and sort of outline of the 3-week unit. You'll notice here it has just a nice reminder at the top from Teachers College to say that we know students regress during that summer time because they're not reading as much, and every 5 weeks they can drop approximately 1 reading level. So similarly with our test prep unit, we wouldn't want students to just abandon information or independent reading, that is, and possibly drop a reading level here as well. So just to keep that going during this unit, there is time for that workshop model as well. There is a Schoology course, however, right now it just contains links to the drive where the resources are housed, so it's more teacher friendly right now. The goal in the future is to have the different passages and questions and resources in this course so that way you can have students open up the course and then on their iPads download or just open, that is, the passages. So that's in progress. But this page right here, these 3 little charts and the tables are really to kind of help you understand the structure of the 3-week unit. So when we look at each of the 3 genre weeks, each day is a little bit different than what we're normally used to. Mondays are going to be more or less known as these teacher experience or shared experiences, that is, where we're going to have more whole group at the carpet, and this is where a passage will be read aloud and the teacher will be modeling, annotating that passage with the different standards in mind, similar to what students will do on the IAR. And in writing, they'll also be doing sort of that shared writing experience about how a prompt, can be answered using that text evidence and looking back in the passage. Then Tuesday through Thursday is where it's very much workshop based. You'll have a short mini lesson, and then students can go off to be reading in a different passage to practice that same standard and also have some time for independent reading. Friday for each of the 3 weeks will be offered as a mock practice day. Something we've heard a lot from teachers is to say that students don't have the stamina to work through that 90-minute period maybe for reading a passage or 2, answering multiple choice questions, and then pacing themselves for a response. With that in mind, we built in some opportunities if you'd like to take advantage where new passages, there's been so many released items from IAR, so there's new passages each time. That way we don't burn out a passage and the students aren't, we want it to be a cold read basically. So that's offered every Friday. Here are the links to those Teachers College documents that have been edited, just for your reference. But let's take a minute to look at the 3 weeks and the types of writing that are included in each. This is a reading and writing unit, so there are mini lessons for reading and mini lessons for writing. But the reason I'm going to focus on the writing with this sort of overview is because the writing prompts drove the structure of this unit. So the first week is based on the narrative writing task. This type of writing you've seen before where students are asked to, for example, write a story now from a different character's perspective. The same events, but what would that other character be thinking? Maybe it's also been asked to say, all right, now write what would happen next, but keep the same structure of the story that's been, that you just read. This is one type of writing students will be. This is sort of Form A. And Form B, students will be asked to complete a literary analysis task. And that's a task where students are reading multiple passages, and then they're taking one element, so maybe character traits or theme, and they're asked to compare and contrast that element between both passages and use text evidence to answer the question. So students will either be writing the narrative writing task or the literary analysis task. They won't be writing both. Every student, on the other hand, will be writing the research simulation task. This mirrors our district ELA assessment we just completed, where students will be asked a nonfiction question based on 2 nonfictional passages and possibly a video, and be asked to pull evidence from all 3 to answer that question. So when looking at all 3 types of writing, we dedicated a week to each to offer you a moment to do that shared writing, and then some practice for students throughout the week, and last at the end on that Friday to just give it a go and see how their pacing and planning works in that time frame given on IAR. On the other hand, when we think about reading, there were some standards left off in the Teachers College unit that we noticed were and will be most likely assessed on the IAR. Some of them are theme, point of view, text structure. So we wanted to build those moments in. So if you felt your students need some refreshers on that, those are now included in this unit, and we'll talk about where later. But with standards in mind, you'll notice each week addresses different standards. We've mentioned those here. So now if you wanted to go a little deeper, each of these are just bookmarked within. If we wanted to say, all right, what lessons that didn't work. What lessons do we want to try for our students week 1 when we're thinking about that narrative writing task? This is the outlook. We have it all color-coded purple for you. So there is day 1 here. And you'll notice that the new structure is such that we have reading on the left and the writing lesson on the right. The reason for this is to show how sometimes you can use the same passage for reading and writing. And sometimes it's just that same language, but it saves you some time when you get into the writing lesson that you don't have to reread a new passage. So in here, you'll notice that there's a few options. But let me back it up a little bit. I apologize. For day 1, it's that shared experience. So we have everything linked in that's necessary to execute any lesson. Here's the passage. Here's where you would refer to the Teachers College unit. There's the reading one. And later in the day when you do writing, here's your writing pages in the unit you'd want to refer to. Some different resources that are necessary that come in. All of that's here. Something that we noticed wasn't incorporated in the Teachers College unit was theme. They didn't talk too much about it, and we know that's huge. So what we did was we built in part of this lesson to lift it to incorporate some analysis of theme and even some resources. You'll notice the columns to the directly right here are the tools. So it just gives you a nice either link or visual of what tool you should have ready for each lesson. And for most of them, it goes through all aspects of the mini lesson. Sometimes it'll otherwise just say refer to pages such and such in the Teachers College unit. Another thing we looked at the IAR released items for was to see, just to determine what is the academic language that test writers are using when asking students about theme or text structure. What are the words they're using so we can build that in for students so they can be flexible when answering that. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. So down here is some of those words that would be related to this lesson. And you'll notice this after each lesson. Day 2 starts where there's optional lessons. So you notice how it says right here, optional lesson 1, right? For writing, it's just one option, and here's what it is. But when we go back to reading and we're scrolling down, there's that one option, lesson 1, and all of the tools necessary. Here's that theme extension. That way you can just use the same materials. We even brought in some resources to specifically give kids some language to use when discussing theme. But here is what I wanted to point out, that within the same day, you'll notice this separating line shows when another optional lesson appears. You have that opportunity to determine how you want this lesson to go for students, which lessons they might need better or more of, that is. Do they need character feelings? If so, here are some resources for that. Again, just bringing in some visuals from the internet to show you how that could look, some more theme extensions. And again, on this first day, there's 3 options, but just to give you some flexibility. Another option is to talk about character traits. It's the same passage, which is great, so you don't have to take time to reread that passage. But here are some other tools and the links to that to help students understand how to explain a character trait or identify that within the text. It's good to even just remember and use maybe our tools from that we've already taught with that is. So Unit 1, Anchor Chart 3, kind of could support this type of mini lessons. So we brought that in for you. And then again, here is the academic language related to this standard in these topics. So that's sort of the overview. Like if you just kept going through, there are mentions of times when, for example, a lesson isn't from the original Teachers College unit. For example, point of view is a big one because they're asked sometimes to write about the other point of view of the character. So to build in some language specifically here, here's a new passage. There is some resources to help with that and some examples for your modeling, but also for students practicing. And on the other hand, with writing, there is some tools that were incorporated to each lesson, so we've just linked them in. And here again, it's saying which page to refer to. Built an anchor chart that's basically what was being asked of us during Teachers College, but we just made it in advance for you. That way it's done and ready to go. Just kind of points out what things you should have for your lessons. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. But as we sort of scroll down, I hope I'm not getting you too seasick. Here's day 4. Again, we notice or see that there's another option. What would it be? You can just kind of look real quickly here. All right, it's when we are talking specifically about lessons relating to how to answer multiple choice questions. So it gives them some real specific test prep type of practice. So it just kind of goes through all of that again. And here's your other option. This is when, again, here's where in the unit you could look from Teachers College. But it's really just saying when we have a Part A and a Part B, how do we really use and answer those questions? Over here for writing, it's really preparing students for answering questions with the prompt in mind and how can they plan for that? How do they use text evidence? And once again, the pages for that lesson are mentioned here. A lot of the tools are already brought in. Some of these academic languages really just speak to the test type of questions, the words for that. And here's day 5. And each week is built in this structure, so I won't go through the next week in the same way. But day 5, in general, if you wanted to, you have the option of giving students a cold read with a reading assessment, and maybe you don't have them do all the multiple choice questions. You decide how much you want them to do. We don't really want to burn them out. But then this writing practice on day 5 really lines up with that type of writing we said would be on the assessment called the narrative writing assessment. Narrative writing task, that is, sorry. This one is all about writing from the other character's point of view. So then it changes to blue because with blue it's the next genre. Well, not necessarily genre, but different type of writing. So this is the literary analysis writing. This is where we'll have paired passages and answer a question. Note at the top of, before we even get into the lessons, there's just a nice chart to talk to you about, what this week holds. Here is some ideas for how to structure your reading and writing, workshops. Here are the passages you would need for this work, and even some conferring supports. These are directly right from Teachers College. But know that this whole week that's in blue was built out of the need for IAR assessing on the literary analysis task. This isn't found at all in the Teachers College document. So we just used released items basically from IAR to build this week. And so all of the materials are here. Everything is present that you would need, some teacher notes, etc. And just even some examples of T-charts and things. That way, a lot of that prep time is done for you. We even get into comparing a poem to short story because we see that sometimes on IAR. So we want to just offer practice for students and give you some language and materials to execute that. Here's that academic language again. So something else we noticed was left off of the practice was really analyzing, using context clues to infer word meaning. What better resource to use than our benchmark? So we just brought some of that in. And on the other hand, in the writing side of things, we're really talking about answering that prompt and how to bring in the multiple pieces of text evidence. So here we find ourselves at day 4, where all of this is sort of, boiling down to get to that multiple pieces of text evidence to answer a prompt. Something that we felt would be necessary to bring in was to show students the difference between the elements of drama, poetry, and then obviously they have the other resource for the story structure. But questions sometimes say, how is this story structured? Does it have theme, rhythm, stage directions, or dialogue? And what they're doing is giving multiple choice answers, half from drama and half from poetry. It can be very confusing for students. We wanted to build some time in where you can really look at the different structures, have that conversation with kids so they're familiar with that language. Just kind of giving you some examples of where text evidence can support answering questions with writing. All of these resources are found in that drive that we talked about at the very beginning. Here again on day 5, you'll notice if you wanted to offer a cold read 90-minute prompt, you could do that with your reading and writing blocks together. Otherwise, just chop it in half and decide what you want to do. But it's all directly from IAR, and this prompt directly aligns with the practice that you had been doing up through this week. Something a lot of schools had talked about doing or wanting time for is to give students a chance to practice this test online, so they're really familiar with scrolling on the iPad, reading a passage in that format versus the paper passage. And so we've built in 3 optional days for you to do just that. This first computer practice-based test, Unit 1, is all fiction. So notice here it describes what is in that. You might want to maybe do this game day right after the first 2 weeks, right? It gives them a chance to do the narrative writing task. They're comparing theme in both passages. There's some multiple choice questions, but they're doing it online. This other option you might want to do at the end of the nonfiction part, which is the week we'll talk about next. This really goes into nonfiction, some paired passages, and the research simulation task. Some people have been maybe giving the paper version after so they know how students are doing. If you'd like it, it's there. The answers are there. But however you'd like to use this could be used in any way, but the materials are here for your resource, or for your reference, that is. The last week focuses on the research simulation task and any informational any informational standards that need to be refreshed for students. So we get into day 1, and here's your mentor text, and then we're able to kind of build a sort of road mapping. This will make more sense once you look into it a little bit more, but whenever you read a nonfiction text, here are some things you want to pay attention to. So instead of story structure, it's that text structure. We also like to build in an opportunity for what students can be reading during workshops, so it's not the same text. In the writing aspect of things, they're going to have 2 passages and a video, and one of the lessons will take you through how to analyze, we'll take students through, that is, how to analyze a video and timestamp text evidence and use it in a response. So here's the nonfiction lesson. It was just really brief on that first day because we're just using it to look at one passage with all things in mind. Then we get into specific things. One of the lessons could be about text features, right? And then we get into, let's take a moment to go into text structure. We know on the IAR there are specific questions, and some were built in here that are directly from the IAR, where it asks, how is this part of the passage structured? Is it compare contrast? Is it cause effect? And then for part B, how do you know that? What is some text evidence to support that? So we built in some practice for that here. On the writing side of things, they're just using a new anchor chart mentioned here of how to write a informational response with the prompt in mind. Since this is back to using the Teachers College unit, here are the pages you can refer to. Gives some support for paraphrasing. Then day 3, you have reading for more than one main idea. That's a huge one. Sorry, I scrolled down. Main idea is a huge aspect of the IAR, and so likely we wanted to incorporate that lesson and keep it. It's from these pages in Teachers College, same text. So again, we're not wasting too much time in our mini lesson rereading. It's just analyzing it for that purpose. On the writing side of things, there's a really nice writing extended response checklist from Teachers College that can support students during that process. In reading on this day, it really has a nice option that talks about inferring relationships within informational texts. We noticed this was asked of students in the IAR, so we wanted to make sure you had time to plan for this. It's these pages of the unit. Some examples of how it sounds in IAR are mentioned here. But you'll notice that we added something on because of IAR. We wanted to make sure students had some opportunities to practice this. What are the questions that relate to that? And just really capitalizing on what's been released. Similarly for writing, a lot of the examples were just mentioned in the packet. There really was no tool for that. So we built some of those tools and you'll find them linked in here. Day 4 is one of my favorite days, but what it accomplishes for students is how to watch a video and pull text evidence from a video. So we adjusted this lesson to really make sure it supports them, students for the IAR. Since the main passage for the week for the mentor text was all about roller coasters, this video is just a 2.5-minute video about the history of roller coasters. So it could be an example of how would you respond to a question about the history of roller coasters? How would you watch a video with that in mind? So if we're thinking chronologically, how would I be taking information from that video and then using it for a response? So I just gave you some examples of how that could be captured for students in a triple T chart. But then, since students, on the other hand, will be, their main prompt will be about these silent films. So something that Teachers College gave us. I'm going to scroll back up to the writing aspect of things. Teachers College has them respond to a question about, let's see, students will be talking about silent films and the Foley artist. That was new information to me. A Foley artist is basically the sound effect artist on a movie. And so students get an opportunity to practice watching a film, which it should be down here in a minute. Let me just scroll down a little farther, over here. So they watch this film and it gives you clues as far as, what needs to be pulled and what would be purposeful, so you can check in with students on how well they're doing with this. And then they can, oppositely, on the right-hand side of things with writing, they can write a prompt using that text evidence. And here is an example of that prompt already ready for you to go. And then day 5 would be just like the other weeks before, be an optional, not game day, but just cold read opportunity to practice the same type of writing. If you feel kids are ready to go, they did well on the ELA, you don't have to do this. It's just there for your reference. All right, so that was a long-winded explanation, but we just wanted to give you an understanding of how the week is structured, but also how it prepares for the IAR. That way you can make decisions based on your student needs. Please reach out to me, Kate Karasek, so it's KKARASEK at barrington220.org. If you have any questions and need more explanation on that. But if we look back at the unit, all of the materials needed for each of the weeks are within here. The last thing I wanted to talk and just share with you is a calendar, because some of you might be saying, when would I do this unit and when might I do the other units that are coming up after? This unit is really projected to be about 3 weeks and 2 days. With that in mind, for example, if you began on February 24th, you could run this unit up until February 17th. No, sorry, March 17th. That did not make sense. All the way through March 17th. And there'll be another screencast coming out about the Poetry If Then unit, which will be released this week too. But that unit is only about 8 days. So if you were to do the Poetry If Then unit, all of these units then would conclude, that is, before the MAP window opens on April 30th or the IAR window opens on April 2nd. So this just kind of can assure you that, all right, if I make sure I start either on the 18th of February, the 24th of February, somewhere in that range, you would be giving yourself enough time to finish basically before spring break, when students would need to have had these reviews. Again, any questions, just reach out. Thanks for listening.